Sean, my pronouns are she, her, and I am a proud black trans woman. Also, please be kind, I'm like super nervous and really bad at public speaking. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to say today, I told myself that I wasn't going to get angry. And then I realized exactly why we're here. I'm not going to try and just focus on my story because I know my story is not unique. It goes without saying that there are so many people here that have been subjected to an unbelievable amount of abuse and dehumanization, so much so that we've come to accept it as an everyday reality. Now, with trans rights and the fight for trans liberation facing a barrage of constant attacks, now more than ever, we need to break that cycle. We need to challenge everyday transphobia. We need to challenge the appalling misinformation and fear-mongering campaigns which analogously posit the same rhetoric that homophobes and racists of yesteryear used to attack gay people and people of colour respectively. Seemingly every day, be it Sky News, the BBC, The Economist, The Guardian or other news sources, we seem to be seeing transphobic rhetoric published without opposition. In the UK, this has taken the form of a brand of pseudo-feminism that seems entirely focused on trans issues while comparatively indifferent to the many structural injustices that women in the UK and abroad are subjected to. One particularly well-known transphobic pseudo-feminist, for example, praised MP David Davies, of all people, for standing up for lesbians, all despite him having a voting record which says anything but. Worse still, certain groups and individuals have been attempting to disguise transphobia as free speech, completely disregarding how free speech is very much dependent upon everyone maintaining their political dignity and moral status. Something that's immediately forfeited when the rights and identities of those from a marginalised group are directly attacked. In the 4 years I spent as a student at Bristol University, I repeatedly saw transphobia be presented as an appropriate and legitimate point of view. The worst of this came in 2018 when a student group at UOB hosted a known transphobe at the exact same time as Bristol SU's Vigil for Trans Day of Remembrance. How is this okay? In the face of this, several of us decided to protest, and the very next day we were met with a barrage of online abuse which I was disproportionately subjected to. Of course, this wasn't just limited to transphobia. I had several people hint and one person say outright that I looked like a gollywog. This was because we protested the fact that a known transphobe was literally scheduled to spout transphobic rhetoric while at the same time, on the other side of the university, the names of the trans people who had been brutally murdered that year were supposed to be remembered. I recall thinking to myself that sends a far stronger message to trans students than a performative rainbow flag ever could. What's worse though is that the same speaker and several other high-profile transphobes were invited back. I asked a member of senior management directly if the event could be made student-only on the basis of trans and BME students. She refused. Of course, as many of you know, transphobia is not exclusive to the realms of news and academia. Last year, the former Health Minister, Jackie Doyle-Price, appeared on the podcast of a certain transphobic conspiracy theorist who maintains that young people are being forced into transitioning to legitimize what she deems a fetish. On the podcast, Doyle-Price made some rather sinister claims about trans people, but I guess what do you expect from someone who accuses another political party of being paid by pharmaceutical companies to promote trans rights? That's our former health minister.
Shame! 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 Shame!
It's sadly no surprise then how trans people are treated within the medical system, with everything only seemingly getting worse. This year, many trans masculine people have seen their bottom surgeries cancelled and referrals suspended with seemingly no end in sight. Also, fairly recently, we've seen an unprecedented attack on the healthcare rights of trans youth, in particular their right of Gillick competency. In this case, all seemingly justified by bigotry, misinformation, or fundamentally ableist notions that someone with autism cannot know their gender identity. And then there's the issue of the NHS waiting lists. Last year, the Laurel's Gender Identity Clinic in the Southwest saw 2 new service users. 2. Even ignoring this, assuming the Southwest Gender Identity Clinic gets through referrals for first appointments at the same rate that it did between 2016 and 2020, if someone were to be referred there now, they would not be seen until somewhere between 6 and 12 years. Years. That's not for hormones, that's not for surgery, that's just to be seen for an initial assessment. While the Southwest is definitely hit by the appalling waiting times, this issue is definitely not unique, with all of the waiting lists in England and Wales spanning over 2 years just for a first assessment. These unaddressed waiting times have put us en route towards the backdoor privatisation of a crucial service, and obviously this is going to hurt the trans people the most, who have already been the biggest victims of Tory austerity. What's it say when so many of us are having to rely on a GoFundMe or be forced into sex work just to be able to meet our basic healthcare needs? Trans people... Trans people are standing here in the UK in 2021, having to say that healthcare should be a right and not a privilege. A couple of years ago, we were given an initial pledge by the then Prime Minister Theresa May to reform the Gender Recognition Act. Many of us were left in hope that we'd see the process through which one can change their legal gender, be depathologized, allow gender self-definition, or give non-binary people legal recognition and remove the ability of a spouse to veto their partner's gender change if they are married. But no. Instead, we saw only minor changes following government consultation, which only seemed to take place due to the government listening to several transphobic groups. This so-called consultation, as many here can attest, opened the floodgates of transphobia in the UK, thrusting transphobic attitudes further into mainstream discourse, exacerbating the culture of fear which casts a dark cloud over many of our lives. Even worse, despite the fact that, according to the Sunday Times, 70% of the public that filled in the GRA consultation were in favour of trans people being granted the ability to legally self-identify, we saw the goalpost moved because apparently there was an influx of trans liberation campaigners in the GRA consultation. And you thought Brexit was undemocratic. All of what I've mentioned today is exactly what a two-tier citizenship looks like, and it can't be allowed to fly. I saw the phrase "silence is violence" used repeatedly a lot last year with the Black Lives Matter protests, and I very much suggest that the same is analogous here. If you are cisgender, especially if you're a cis woman, we really need you to not stay silent. Please share links and articles, talk to people, sign petitions, attend protests. If you see transphobia or transphobic rhetoric and misinformation, please call it out. If you can, write to your MP and tell them that you object to the various structural injustices and the culture of fear that are causing so many trans people so much hurt and anguish. Just please don't be silent. And to the government, we simply say, this isn't good enough.
Hi, hello there. Just before we go on to our next speaker, is there an Ariana Farabella in the crowd? If so, we found your Oyster card. Could you go to the first aid station, please? We just want to make sure you get home safe as well. Right, on that note, I'd just like to introduce our next speaker, Ramses Oliver.
Thank you.